Picture this, it's 2 a.m. A billionaire CEO is losing his mind over a system failure that's bleeding his company dry. His entire team of million-dollar engineers can't solve it. Then he catches his maid, a quiet blonde woman who barely speaks, sitting at his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. In 30 seconds, she fixes what his experts couldn't crack in 3 weeks. What happened next will blow your mind, because this isn't just about code. This is about a love story that rewrote everything we think we know about genius, power, and recognition. The story I'm about to tell you has become a viral sensation across romance platforms, inspiring countless adaptations and millions of views. But here's what nobody talks about: the darker truths hidden beneath this modern Cinderella tale, and why it reveals something deeply unsettling about how we value human potential. Ethan Kross wasn't your typical tech CEO. He built his empire from nothing, learning to read people like code, spotting the fakes, the frauds, the ones who talked big but delivered nothing. His company was worth billions, but on this particular night, all of that was about to crumble. For 3 agonizing weeks, his flagship project had been hemorrhaging money. A critical system failure was costing him $200 million, and nobody, not his MIT graduates, not his Silicon Valley poachers, not even the consultants charging $500 an hour, could figure out what was wrong. The board was breathing down his neck. Investors were getting nervous. His reputation was on the line. Then at 2 a.m. he heard something that shouldn't have been possible. The sound of typing coming from his private study. Someone was in there, someone who definitely shouldn't be touching his computer. His first thought, corporate espionage. His second, fury. But when he burst through that door, ready to call security, he found something that defied every assumption he'd ever made about intelligence, about worth, about who deserves to be seen. Lily Brooks sat at his desk, completely absorbed in lines of code that had stumped his entire engineering department. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of invisible presence that made people look right through her. She wore the simple uniform of a domestic worker, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She'd been cleaning his penthouse for exactly 2 weeks, and he'd barely noticed her existence. Until now. The code she was working on, the same code that had caused 3 weeks of sleepless nights for his team, was flowing under her fingers like water. Clean, elegant, flawless. She wasn't just fixing random bugs. She was rewriting entire functions, optimizing processes, solving problems that his engineers hadn't even identified yet. When she finally looked up and saw him standing there, the terror in her eyes was immediate. She stammered an apology, tried to explain, but Ethan couldn't hear her over the sound of his own world shifting. This woman, this invisible maid who he'd never bothered to really see, had just solved his $200 million nightmare in minutes. But here's where the story gets really disturbing, because what happened next reveals something dark about how our society treats hidden talent, especially when it comes wrapped in the wrong package. Lily's story isn't unique, and that's what makes it so terrifying. She was a former MIT student, top 10% of her class, who'd been forced to drop out when her family lost everything. Her father's bad investments, her mother's medical bills, a cascade of financial disasters that turned a brilliant computer science student into someone scrubbing floors for minimum wage. Think about that for a moment. How many Lily Brooks are out there right now? How many people with extraordinary minds are invisible to us because they're wearing the wrong uniform, working the wrong job, living in the wrong zip code? The research on this is actually shocking. Studies show that socioeconomic status is one of the biggest predictors of whether someone's intelligence gets recognized and developed. Brilliant kids from poor families are systematically overlooked, while mediocre students from wealthy backgrounds get endless opportunities. It's not just unfair, it's a massive waste of human potential. But Lily's case was even more complex. She hadn't just been overlooked, she'd been actively hiding her abilities. For years, she'd been working cleaning jobs, waitressing, retail work, anything to survive and help her family. She'd learned to make herself invisible, to blend into the background, to never draw attention to her capabilities. And that's exactly what made her so dangerous to the established order. Because when genius hides in plain sight, it exposes how broken our systems of recognition really are. Ethan's million-dollar engineering team had been chasing the wrong solutions for weeks, trapped in their own assumptions and methodologies. It took someone completely outside their hierarchy, someone they would never have thought to consult, to see what they couldn't. The code she'd fixed wasn't just technically brilliant, it revealed a fundamental flaw in how the entire system had been designed. Her solution was so elegant, so obviously correct, that it made everyone else's approaches look amateur by comparison. And she'd done it without asking for permission, without expecting credit, without even thinking she deserved to be heard. That's the thing about hidden genius, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It just quietly makes everything better, usually without anyone noticing. But what happens when someone finally does notice? That's where things get complicated. Ethan Cross was a man who trusted data, not fairy tales. So when he discovered Lily's abilities, he didn't immediately promote her or reveal her genius to the world. Instead, he did something much more calculated and arguably more manipulative. He started testing her. Over the following weeks, he began leaving increasingly complex coding puzzles in places where she might find them during her cleaning rounds. Files left accidentally open on his screen, printed code with deliberate errors mixed in with papers on his desk, logic problems disguised as routine diagnostics. Every single time, without fail, she solved them. Not just solved them, she improved them. Her solutions were consistently more elegant, more efficient, more innovative than anything his paid team was producing. And she never asked for credit, never demanded recognition, never even signed her name to her work. Just quiet, humble notes in the margins, not sure if this helps, but maybe. Sorry if this is wrong, just a thought. Hope this is okay. The humility was almost painful to watch. Here was someone with extraordinary ability, apologizing for being brilliant, apologizing for helping, apologizing for existing in a space where she wasn't supposed to belong. But here's where the story gets ethically murky, because while Ethan was discovering and nurturing Lily's talent, he was also manipulating her. He was using her feelings of invisibility and unworthiness to extract valuable work from her, work that was saving his company millions, while she continued to earn a maid's salary. It raises uncomfortable questions about exploitation, about power dynamics, about whether good intentions justify questionable methods. Was Ethan protecting Lily by keeping her secret, or was he taking advantage of her vulnerability? The answer is probably both, and that's what makes this story so morally complex. Because at the same time he was testing her abilities, something else was happening. He was falling for her, not just her mind, but her character. The way she approached problems with genuine curiosity rather than ego. The way she cared about his space, adjusting his grandfather clock when it ran slow, organizing his books by subject and author, treating his mother's photograph with quiet reverence. She was brilliant, but she was also kind, invisible but profound, powerless but transformative. And that combination was apparently irresistible to a man who'd spent his entire career surrounded by people who demanded to be seen, who fought for recognition, who measured their worth by their titles and salaries. The tension couldn't last forever. 3 weeks into this strange dance of secret tests and hidden solutions, Lily finally broke the silence. Ethan was struggling with another system, diagnostic, his entire development team still chasing their tails on a back-end stability issue. The problem was costing thousands of dollars in downtime every day, and nobody could agree on the root cause. Lily was cleaning nearby as she always was, moving through his space like a ghost. But this time she paused. She looked at his screen just for a moment, and then she spoke. "I think it's not the code." 4 words that changed everything. She explained with quiet certainty that the problem wasn't in the code itself, but in how the data was being routed. A bottleneck in the security protocols, causing verification calls to stack up and time out. The system was essentially blocking its own progress. It was the exact hypothesis that had been floated and dismissed in the first week of analysis. His entire team had moved on to other theories, but Lily had identified the real issue with a kind of intuitive understanding that cut through all their elaborate troubleshooting. When Ethan tested her theory, she was right, completely, undeniably right. His $1 million team had been chasing the wrong solution for weeks, while the answer was standing right there in a cleaning uniform. That's when he finally understood what he was really dealing with. This wasn't just about hidden talent or wasted potential. This was about fundamental questions of value, recognition, and worth. How do we decide who deserves to be heard? How do we measure intelligence? How do we recognize genius when it doesn't come with the expected packaging? And more personally, how do you fall in love with someone's mind before you even know their story? Because that's what was happening to Ethan Cross. He was falling in love with Lily's approach to problems, her quiet confidence, her complete lack of ego. He was falling in love with the way she saw patterns that others missed, the way she improved everything she touched without asking for credit. He was falling in love with her invisibility, which made him desperate to make her visible. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Ethan's first step was to offer Lily a position as a technical consultant, nothing flashy, just a chance to work on the problems she was already solving in secret. Her response was heartbreaking in its self-doubt. "I'm not qualified," she said. "I never even finished my degree. I'm just a maid." The word just hit him like a physical blow. Here was someone who had single-handedly saved his company millions of dollars, apologizing for her existence because she didn't have the right piece of paper, the right title, the right background. It crystallized something for Ethan about how broken our systems of recognition really are. Lily had been proving her worth for weeks, solving problems that stumped teams of credentialed experts, but she still saw herself as just a maid because that's what society had taught her to believe. The unofficial partnership that developed was fascinating to watch. By night, Lily would quietly fix whatever critical issues had stumped the official team. By morning, Ethan would present the solutions to his executives, carefully protecting her identity while ensuring the company benefited from her brilliance. It was a perfect arrangement in some ways. She got to do the work she loved without facing the scrutiny and pressure of recognition, while he got to nurture her confidence and abilities in a safe environment. But it was also fundamentally unsustainable. You can't hide that level of genius forever, especially when it's consistently outperforming teams of highly paid experts. The breaking point came when the board started asking questions. They wanted to meet this mysterious, anonymous asset who kept delivering miracle solutions. They didn't want to run a company based on ghosts and secrets. Ethan faced an impossible choice. He could continue protecting Lily's privacy, risking his credibility with the board, or he could expose her to a world that might not be ready to see genius in a maid's uniform. He chose exposure, but he did it on his own terms in his own way, with all the power and influence he could muster to ensure she would be seen as she deserved to be seen. The company's quarterly briefing was supposed to be routine. Financial updates, project status reports, the usual corporate theater. Instead, it became the stage for one of the most dramatic revelations in the company's history. Ethan stood before a room full of executives, department heads, and senior staff, all expecting their usual dose of corporate speak and sanitized success stories. Instead, he told them about a miracle. He described the months of system failures, the millions in losses, the expert consultants who couldn't solve the problem. Then he revealed the truth that their salvation had come from the most unexpected source possible. "Would you join me, Lily?" The shock in that room was palpable. Heads turned to see a young woman in a simple uniform, holding cleaning supplies, looking like she'd rather disappear into the floor. The disconnect between expectations and reality was so stark that some people literally couldn't process what they were seeing. But Ethan didn't let the moment pass. He guided Lily to the stage, handed her the microphone, and asked the room to truly see her for the first time. "This is Lily Brooks," he said. "She was hired to sweep our floors. Instead, she rewrote the very code that saved our company." The standing ovation that followed wasn't just applause. It was a collective recognition of how completely they had all missed the extraordinary person who had been walking among them invisibly. But here's what's really interesting about that moment. The applause wasn't just for Lily's technical abilities. It was for the profound disruption she represented to their assumptions about worth, about intelligence, about who deserves recognition. In that room full of MBAs and advanced degrees, the most valuable person had been the one they'd never bothered to see. It was a humbling reminder that genius doesn't always come with the expected credentials. Yet even as they celebrated her, you have to wonder how many other Lily Brooks were still invisible to them. How many people with extraordinary abilities were still overlooked because they didn't fit the expected mold. The revelation changed everything for Lily, but it also exposed something uncomfortable about the rest of them. They'd been so focused on looking for talent in the expected places that they'd completely missed the extraordinary person who was literally cleaning up their messes. What happened next transcended the usual CEO discovers hidden talent storyline. Because while Lily's professional transformation was remarkable, the personal connection that had been building between her and Ethan was even more powerful. MIT reached out, offering to reinstate her scholarship. Tech companies started headhunting her. Venture capitalists wanted to meet with her. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of the genius who had been hiding in plain sight. But Lily's response revealed something profound about her character. She turned down opportunities that would have changed her life because she wouldn't abandon her mother, who needed care. The same selflessness that had originally forced her to drop out of MIT was still guiding her decisions. That's when Ethan made a move that went far beyond professional mentorship. He quietly arranged for Lily's mother to receive the best possible medical care, fully covered by an anonymous sponsor. He removed the barrier that was keeping Lily from pursuing her dreams without asking for anything in return. When Lily discovered what he had done, her reaction was everything. The tears, the gratitude, the overwhelming realization that someone had seen her completely, not just her abilities, but her heart, her struggles, her sacrifices. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you deserve a life," he replied, "a real one, not just surviving, not just hiding, and because I want to see you shine." That's when the professional relationship became something deeper. Ethan wasn't just recognizing Lily's talent, he was seeing her whole person, her complete worth, her full potential. He was loving her not despite her invisibility, but because of the extraordinary person she had remained while being invisible. The romance that developed was unusual because it was based on genuine recognition and mutual respect. Ethan fell in love with Lily's mind first, her character second, her appearance last. Lily fell in love with someone who saw her completely when the rest of the world had looked right through her. But it was also controversial. The power dynamics were undeniable: billionaire CEO and former maid, employer and employee, the one who had the power to make or break careers. Critics argued that the relationship was inherently exploitative, that Lily couldn't truly consent in a situation where she was so economically dependent. Others saw it differently, as a love story that transcended traditional boundaries, that proved worth isn't determined by wealth or status, that showed how love can exist between people who see each other's true value. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But what's undeniable is that their relationship challenged conventional ideas about who belongs with whom, about what makes people worthy of love and recognition. The culmination of their story came at the Innovators of the Future Gala, where Lily was nominated for Most Influential Young Innovator of the Year. She sat in the back row, still not entirely comfortable with recognition, still half expecting to fade back into invisibility. When her name was called as the winner, the moment was electric. Here was someone who had spent years believing she was invisible, suddenly being honored as one of the most important innovators of her generation. Her acceptance speech was perfect in its simplicity and power. She talked about hiding behind fear, about brilliance that doesn't demand recognition, about the courage to try one more time. She spoke directly to everyone who had ever felt invisible, who had ever been overlooked, who had ever doubted their own worth. But then Ethan joined her on stage. What followed was one of the most romantic proposals in recent memory, but it was also something more. When Ethan got down on one knee in front of thousands of people, he wasn't just proposing marriage, he was making a public declaration that this woman, this formerly invisible maid, was the most valuable person in his world. "You didn't just fix broken code," he said, "you fixed something in me that I didn't know was broken." The proposal went viral not just because it was romantic, but because it represented something people desperately wanted to believe: that worth isn't determined by job titles or bank accounts, that love can see past surface appearances, that everyone deserves to be recognized for their true value. But it also sparked intense debate. Some saw it as the ultimate fairy tale romance, proof that dreams can come true and that love conquers all. Others criticized it as perpetuating harmful myths about women needing to be rescued by wealthy men, about the idea that exceptional circumstances are required for working-class people to find happiness. The reality is that their story is both inspiring and problematic, both romantic and ethically complex. It's a modern fairy tale that reveals as much about our society's values and blind spots as it does about the power of love and recognition. Here's what nobody talks about when they share this story: the systemic problems it reveals about how we value human potential. Lily's story is inspiring, but it's also an indictment of a society that consistently overlooks extraordinary people because they don't come with the right packaging. For every Lily Brooks who gets discovered, how many others remain invisible? How many brilliant minds are wasted because they can't afford the right education, don't have the right connections, don't fit the expected demographic profile? The story is romantic, but it's also deeply disturbing when you consider the broader implications. We live in a world where someone can have extraordinary abilities and still be invisible to the systems that are supposed to recognize and develop talent. We live in a world where your worth is largely determined by your job title, your educational credentials, your socioeconomic status. Lily's transformation from maid to celebrated innovator is heartwarming, but it also highlights how arbitrary and unfair our systems of recognition really are. She was the same person with the same abilities, whether she was scrubbing floors or accepting awards. The only thing that changed was who was paying attention. And that raises uncomfortable questions about merit, about fairness, about whether our society is actually a meritocracy, or just a system that rewards the right kind of people for having the right kind of advantages. The romance between Ethan and Lily is beautiful, but it's also a fantasy that most people in similar situations will never experience. Real-life maids don't usually get discovered by billionaire CEOs. Real-life genius doesn't usually get recognized and rewarded. Real-life Cinderella stories are vanishingly rare. But maybe that's exactly why this story resonates so powerfully. Because it represents what we wish were true, that everyone's worth would be recognized, that love could transcend class boundaries, that brilliance would always find a way to shine. The story gives us hope that there might be someone out there who sees our hidden potential, who recognizes our true worth, who loves us for who we really are rather than what we appear to be. The Maid Genius CEO romance has become one of the most popular tropes in modern fiction, spawning countless novels, short dramas, and viral videos. But why does this particular story pattern resonate so powerfully? Part of it is pure wish fulfillment. Most people feel undervalued and overlooked at some point in their lives. The idea that someone might discover our hidden brilliance, recognize our true worth, and transform our circumstances is deeply appealing. But there's something deeper going on here. The story taps into fundamental anxieties about class, worth, and recognition in modern society. It speaks to people who feel invisible, who believe their talents are going unrecognized, who wonder if they're being judged by the wrong criteria. The romance element adds another layer of fantasy, the idea that love can transcend social boundaries, that someone might fall in love with your mind rather than your status, that genuine connection is possible across lines of power and privilege. But the story also reveals our collective guilt about inequality and wasted potential. We know on some level that our society is failing to recognize and develop talent equitably. We know that brilliant people are being overlooked because of their backgrounds, their circumstances, their lack of opportunities. The Lily Brooks story lets us imagine a world where those injustices are corrected, where hidden genius is discovered and celebrated, where love conquers social barriers. It's a comforting fantasy that helps us avoid confronting the harder truths about systematic inequality and missed opportunities. Yet even as we enjoy the fantasy, we can't ignore the real questions it raises. How many people with extraordinary abilities are invisible to us right now? How many potential innovations are lost because we're not looking in the right places? How many love stories never happen because we can't see past surface appearances? The story is powerful because it forces us to confront our own assumptions about worth and recognition. It challenges us to look more carefully at the people around us, to question our criteria for valuing others, to consider whether we might be missing something extraordinary in someone we've written off as ordinary. As this story continues to evolve and spread across platforms, it's worth examining what it really says about our values and our dreams. The Maid Genius CEO romance isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror that reflects our deepest hopes and fears about recognition, worth, and love. On one level, it's a story about justice. Lily deserved to be recognized for her abilities all along. The injustice wasn't that she was working as a maid, it was that a society that claims to value talent and intelligence had failed to see hers. When Ethan discovers her genius, he's not just falling in love, he's correcting a systematic failure of recognition. On another level, it's a story about transformation. Both Lily and Ethan are changed by their connection. She learns to see her own worth and step into her power. He learns to look beyond surfaces and recognize value in unexpected places. Their love story is also a story about personal growth and mutual recognition. But it's also a story about power and privilege. Ethan has the resources and influence to transform Lily's life in ways that would be impossible for most people. He can pay for her mother's medical care, create job opportunities, provide platforms for recognition. The romance is beautiful, but it's also enabled by massive inequalities of power and wealth. The story forces us to grapple with uncomfortable questions about agency and choice. Is Lily truly free to make decisions about her career and her heart when she's so economically dependent? Can genuine love exist across such vast differences in power and privilege? Are we celebrating romance or reinforcing problematic dynamics? There are no easy answers to these questions, which is part of what makes the story so compelling. It's simultaneously inspiring and troubling, romantic and ethically complex, empowering and potentially harmful. Perhaps that's why it continues to captivate audiences, because it reflects the contradictions and complexities of our own society. We want to believe in meritocracy while acknowledging that talent often goes unrecognized. We want to believe in love while recognizing that power dynamics complicate romantic relationships. We want to believe in transformation while understanding that systematic change is much harder than individual success stories. The story of Lily and Ethan gives us a glimpse of a world where worth is recognized, where love transcends boundaries, where justice prevails. It's a beautiful dream that inspires us to look more carefully at the people around us, to question our assumptions about value and recognition, to believe in the possibility of transformation. But it's also a reminder of how far we still have to go. For every Lily Brooks who gets discovered and celebrated, countless others remain invisible. For every fairy tale romance that crosses class lines, millions of people remain trapped by circumstances beyond their control. The real question isn't whether this story is realistic or problematic. It's whether it inspires us to create a world where such dramatic interventions aren't necessary, where talent is recognized regardless of packaging, where everyone's worth is acknowledged and developed. Because in the end, the most powerful thing about Lily's story isn't that she was discovered, it's that she was there all along, brilliant and capable and valuable, waiting for someone to truly see her. The question is, who are we not seeing? Whose genius is hiding in plain sight? Whose worth are we missing because we're looking in the wrong places or judging by the wrong criteria? Maybe the real magic isn't in the fairy tale romance. It's in learning to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to recognize the valuable in the invisible, to love the real rather than the expected. That's the code behind the romance, the algorithm of recognition that could transform not just individual lives, but entire societies. And that's a story worth telling, worth believing in, and worth making real. The Maid who saved the company and captured the CEO's heart is more than just a romance. It's a call to action, a challenge to see better, to love deeper, and to recognize the genius that's been there all along, waiting for someone brave enough to truly see it. In a world full of people demanding to be noticed, maybe the most powerful love stories begin with seeing the ones who never asked to be seen at all.